Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. And thank you for joining us for our plant-based webinar. We will be going over the general requirements and roadmap to compliance for the SCS Plant-Based Certification. My name is Holly St. Jean. I'm a project associate at the product claims team at SCS, and I'll be doing the introduction here and then handing it off to my colleague Tony for the rest of the webinar. Before we get started, I just wanted to go over a few logistics. Everyone will be in listen-only mode. During the webinar, please type your questions in the question box, and we will answer them during the Q&A portion at the conclusion of the webinar. This presentation will be recorded, and you will receive a link to the recording sometime tomorrow after the webinar. Once the webinar has ended, you'll be prompted to take a survey. This will only take a few minutes, so please complete the survey so we can better understand your needs and continue to deliver high-quality webinars. To get started, this will be the general overview for today's webinar. This includes providing some information about SCS, an introduction to the SCS Plant-Based Certification, and overview of the certification process, going over critical control points, and lastly, an overview of compliance documentation, as well as the Q&A at the end. So to get started, a little bit about SCS. For those of you who don't know, SCS is a certification body located in California's Bay Area with satellite offices around the world and has been a leading organization in the movement for a safe and sustainable food system for over 40 years. We have over 15,000 clients from over 125 countries with auditors in every major market across the globe. SCS offers an extensive suite of food safety and sustainability services and also provides public training and on-site training at customer facilities. We also offer self-paced online training such as HACCP and Global Gap in both English and in Spanish. Our auditing services include GFSI benchmark certifications such as Global Gap, SQF, BRCGS, and Primus GFS. The top row here features several product claim services that Tony and I are both involved in, such as NGP, gluten-free, plant-based, and organic. And that's just a little bit about SCS. So now we're going to jump into the introduction for the plant-based certification. Just a reminder, if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the question chat box, and I'll make sure to go over them at the end. And now I'm going to hand it off to Tony for the remainder of the webinar.
Thank you so much, Holly, for starting us off and for the introductions. And welcome everybody to our presentation today. My name is Tony, and I'm our Client Services Manager for the Products Claims Team Division here at SCS. And I'm really excited to speak with you all about our SCS Plant-Based Standard, which is one of the leading plant-based standards on the market today. We'll go ahead and dive right into our presentation. So our plant-based standard is geared towards brands that want to make an impact in their marketing to the more conscious consumer. Sustainability and ethical issues are at the front of people's minds now, and they want to purchase items that reflect their values. Our plant-based standard is a tool that we intended to have consumers see and know that they are purchasing a product that is in fact plant-based. So by achieving verification, you are promoting transparency and enabling confident purchasing decisions to your customers. So we're going to take a quick attendee poll. So please check your screens now. So we want to know a little bit about the products that you sell now. So which of the following options best describes the plant-based labeling on your products now? Is it A, a recognized third-party plant-based certification seal, such as the SCS plant-based seal? B, a self-made claim about being plant-based? C, no plant-based claim or seal on the packaging, meaning like there's nothing there that would indicate that yet, or D, of course, not applicable. Give you guys just a second. Give you just 10 more seconds here. And okay, let's go ahead and close it out. Okay, so as you can see here on your screen, it seems like we have about half of you say that you make a self-made claim, and the other half of you say that you do not make any current claim on your packaging. And it looks like none of y'all so far have a recognized third-party plant-based certification seal yet. So that's super interesting. And so the reason why we wanted to talk about that is because why do we believe that having a verified certification label, such as the SCS Plant-Based Certification, is important to have on your products? Well, in a Nielsen's Global Health and Wellness study, just about half of consumers located in the US and Canada distrust self-made claims on food labels when shopping in stores. Studies show that products with free from labels, such as the SCS Plant-Based Standard, are considered healthier and better than those without the labels to consumers, which in turn shapes both their perceptions and their purchasing actions, like I mentioned earlier. This trend in the market shows that food manufacturers would benefit from increased transparency about the content of their products. Alternative meat and dairy products are getting increasingly difficult to distinguish from animal-derived products. For example, meat replacements used to be easy to identify, but now labeling it makes it harder to tell what product is in fact fully plant-based. Ingredients that were once obviously used for only plant-based products, maybe just as an example, such as like a soy protein, may be used now in other types of products that may not be fully plant-based, causing some consumer confusion. By getting a certification, your customers can be confident in your products and in your product's plant-based nature. So when we're looking at our standard, there are some restrictions on what types of products can actually be certified. So let's go ahead and dive straight into that. So the following categories of products that are eligible for certification to the SCS Plant-Based Standard are listed here. So first is going to be processed foods. And this is going to be any product that is processed in any way. So we're going to include like things like granola bars, sports drinks, meat alternatives, anything like that. Next is going to be common industry ingredients. So this could be things such as like guar gum, citric acid, etc. After this is supplements of any kind or any product that would be widely considered a homeopathic remedy. After that, we have topically applied products. So the most common, of course, is going to be lotions, but we could also do toothpaste, makeup, etc. Our last category is going to be pet foods, which is going to be only for domestic animals, so animals such as dogs and cats. Our biggest asterisk for our plant-based standard is that you cannot certify a product that does not have an animal-based alternative. So you could certify a plant-based yogurt, as there's definitely an animal-derived alternative, or a bouillon cube, or even like a granola bar, as you could have honey included in the granola bar. But if you have an item like a frozen blueberry, you would not be able to get that item certified since there's no animal-derived alternative to a frozen blueberry on the market. Our reason behind this is that we want the SCS Plant-Based Standard to have a real meaning behind it. We want consumers to not look at a packaging of spinach with a logo and say, well, obviously that is plant-based. Our intention is to have the standard be a truly representative mark of items that are plant-based alternatives in an increasingly confusing and competitive marketplace. So moving on to other products that are not eligible for certification. So like I just mentioned, raw primary products and items with no animal-derived alternatives are not allowed. Following that, any product that has packaging that would say something along the lines of may contain animal-derived ingredients is not allowed. A common example of this is going to be chocolate. Since chocolate manufacturing lines often have products that contain milk, chocolate bar manufacturers put that warning on their label. If that is true to your product and you must include that on your label, you cannot be certified. This will be true to any animal-derived input such as dairy, eggs, honey, shellfish, etc. If your facility cannot guarantee that no cross-contamination occurs, we cannot certify your products, unfortunately. Other items that cannot be currently certified are any medicine or drug, and any controlled substance under your applicable law. But if you believe your products may fall under one of these categories, but you're not 100% certain, you can definitely talk with our sales team and we can make sure that that is in fact the case. When we're looking at eligible products, we do have some additional requirements as well. So depending on what category your product would be classified under, there is a restriction on what percentage of your product can be made with plant-based and non-plant-based ingredients. Just for clarification, a non-plant-based ingredient is going to be an inorganic ingredient, such as like a salt, water, minerals, petroleum-derived inputs, etc. For items that you consume, your product must be at least 95% plant-based, meaning you only have 5% of your product weight that can be non-plant-based. If you do not consume a product, but instead apply a product to the body, such as like a lotion, a cosmetic, body oils, etc., at least 50% of that product must be plant-based. When you submit your products to us, you will let us know what designation your product is, and we will audit your product to that specific requirement. We'll go over later how we evaluate each product to get that percentage number. And as a reminder, there's going to be absolutely no allowance for any animal-derived ingredient or component of an ingredient used in SCS plant-based certified products. All products must be fully plant-based. The standard contains an appendix of commonly known animal-derived ingredients, so I do welcome you to look at that. Note this list that is contained in the standard is not exhaustive by any means, but it does give a pretty comprehensive list of potentially animal-derived ingredients or components that you may be using. For the purposes of the standard, bee-produced products such as honey or beeswax are considered animal-derived, and microbially derived ingredients such as yeast or algae like spirulina are allowed and are not considered animal derived. So now that we have figured out that your products are in fact eligible for certification, let's review what the process of getting certified actually looks like. So in general, we recommend giving yourselves 8 to 12 weeks to complete the certification process and to possibly leave more time for any unexpected non-conformities that you will have to resolve before certificate issuance. The time frame in which the certification process occurs can vary drastically based on a bunch of factors. If your ingredients and suppliers are slow to respond to questions, or your production facility is not able to update their SOPs in time, or even scheduling an audit with the auditor takes too much time, these are all factors that can delay your audit. As your auditors, we will definitely try to keep you updated throughout the process with your progress as we move forward with your audit, and keep to whatever time frame you need when possible, but we may not always be able to. So just in general about like what the certification process is, the certification process is divided up into 6 different steps. So we'll go over each of these steps more in depth in the next slides, but just a quick overview here first. You'll begin the process by working with our sales team to figure out your audit scope and see the estimated pricing. After that, you'll move to work onto your onboarding documentation with our coordinator team. Next, you'll be assigned an auditor where you first have an online program orientation meeting, and then where after that you will get your initial documentation request. With this documentation request, you're also going to submit all required input documents and maybe like facility information that we do require, such as like SOPs, critical control points, etc. And we're also going to collect your labels here as well. Following that, you will then work with your auditor to confirm if your facility is eligible for a desk audit or if you'll be required to have a virtual and/or on-site audit. After the inspection or desk audit, you will then resolve your non-conformities with a member of our technical review team. As long as you resolve all non-conformities, and you will get your certificate. If you are not able to resolve all of your non-conformities, then we won't be able to certify you until that is completed. This process is an annual process, and we will monitor your yearly renewal date and reach out to you somewhere around 3 to 5 months before your renewal to get this process started. We aim to complete each year's renewal before the expiration date on your certificate, so we will work with you to get that done. So let's talk a little more in depth about this process. So our first part of the audit, again, will be your scoping. Our sales team will work with you to figure out your certification scope. This will include items such as the number of products and brands that you'll be adding to your initial certificate, types of production facilities we will be inspecting, and ingredients that you use. It is at this step that we will try to determine what the classification of your facility is, so we can determine if you will be eligible for a desk audit or if you'll be required to have an inspection. So kind of the goal of this process is to generate an accurate quote for your scope of audit. You will receive a work order that you will sign, and then we will issue your invoice and can move forward to the next step in the process. So since we talked about facilities, let's talk about how they're classified into our 3 different categories or classifications. The first is a dedicated facility. These are facilities that do not handle animal-derived ingredients within their walls. The next is a non-dedicated facility with allergen control program. These are facilities that handle animal-derived ingredients within their walls, in which all animal-derived ingredients are a part of the facility's allergen control program. This control program has to include all animal-derived ingredients, not just some types such as like eggs and dairy. The third classification is non-dedicated facilities that handle animal-derived ingredients within their walls, but do not have an allergen control program. So this would also include any allergen control program that does not include all animal-derived ingredients. So if the animal control program only extends to some types of ingredients, such as eggs or dairy, this category would apply to this facility. So we're going to take a second to do a second attendee poll. And this time it's going to be about your facility, so please check your screens now. Okay, so we want to know what type of facility classification best matches with what is handled in your facility. Is it a dedicated facility to plant-based production, B, a non-dedicated facility with allergen control program, again, having all animal-derived inputs within that program, or C, non-dedicated facility with no allergen control program. All right, I'll give you guys a few more seconds. Okay, and let me go ahead and wrap it up. I'm going to close the poll now. Go ahead and share those results here. Okay, so it looks like, wow, like a majority of you all have dedicated facilities, and then about a quarter of you are non-dedicated facilities with allergen controls, and then we don't have any respondee that says that you're non-dedicated with no allergen control. Cool. That's super good to know, because let me just pop over to the next slide here. And so like the reason why it's important to figure out what classification your facility falls under is that it will impact what type of audit you have. So it seems like for all of you that responded, you would fall under this first classification here. So it's for facilities that do not handle animal-derived ingredients and for facilities in which all animal-derived ingredients are part of the allergen control program. Those audits are eligible for a desk audit. Desk audits are audits that do not need an auditor present at the facilities, and they can conduct this audit via documentation submission and a completed facility profile, which we will look at further. For facilities that do handle animal-derived ingredients that are not a part of a allergen control program, they will require to have an actual inspection. For those facilities that have a GFSI accredited food safety certification, such as SQF, BRC, FSSC 22000, etc., they are eligible for a virtual audit every year. Virtual audits are audits in which the auditor visits the facility, and that is facilitated through a video call, which means the auditor will not need to actually travel on site. For those facilities that do not have a GFSI accredited food safety certification, they will be subject to our virtual physical on-site inspection cycle. This means that for the first year of your initial audit, the audit will be conducted virtually. The second year, the audit must be conducted physically on site, where the auditor travels to the facility site. And this cycle repeats with a virtual audit in the third year and a physical in the fourth, etc., etc. But it seems like most of you would actually qualify, actually all of you that responded will qualify under a desk audit. So our next step in the process will be collecting your onboarding documentation. So after you pay your invoice, you will be introduced to our coordinator team. There, you're assigned a coordinator who will ask you to fill out your onboarding documentation, which is the information that we need to move forward. So what we're going to look at today will be your package information form and your product profile. So your package information form is the document we collect that contains all of the information for each product that we will be evaluating. So this is going to be the name of the product, the brand name, the UPC or packaging code for that specific product, packaging size and information on the packaging type, and what facility or facilities this product is produced in. It is important that we have this information and it's updated by you over the life of your certification with us. One thing we always like to know constantly is that the way that the product name and brand name is listed on this form is exactly how they will be listed on your certificate. The next form we will gather is going to be your product profile. This form is where you'll be listing out your product formulations in their entirety. The SCS Plant-Based Standard requires that you tell us of all inclusions of ingredients and processing aids included in your product. So this includes any additional inputs such as additives, flavors, microbes, vitamins, carriers, etc. We additionally ask for the suppliers and manufacturers of each input. You can list multiple input suppliers on this form as well. We will need this information as we are required to prove compliance of each input from each input supplier and or manufacturer. Over the life of your certification, as your product formulations may change, you will need to update these product profiles for our records. Each unique product formulation you'll be submitting must have its own product profile. If you have multiple products that have the exact same formulation, like no deviation whatsoever, just a different product name or brand name, then you can submit a single product profile and include all products on it. Once you submit both your package information form and product profiles to your coordinator, you will then be assigned an auditor from our auditing team. That auditor will then schedule an online program orientation meeting with you. These take about an hour, and they are for giving an overview of what the audit process includes and what responsibilities you have as the participant in the certifications, the objectives of the audit, what your inspections will look like, and what documentation you will need to provide. The auditor can also point out any inputs of concerns or potential issues they foresee with your specific audit. If you or your team have any questions or concerns as well, this will be the best time to address them with your assigned auditor. After that meeting, your auditor will publish an initial information request where we will list all of the initial documentation you are required to submit via a platform called ShareFile. The initial information request on ShareFile will have requests for the following information. So it's going to be your ingredient compliance documentation, which again, which is the documentation that's required for all inputs to be used in your certified products. I'm going to go over those in a bit. If your facility is eligible for a desk audit, which it seems like most of y'all's will, we will send over the facility profile. We will also confirm in that meeting your facility's scope. Next, we'll ask you to send over your facility or facilities business licenses. If you're operating as a DBA, we will ask that you send over that registration as well. If you're not operating as a DBA, then you do not need to submit that information. Next, if you're getting a brand that you do not own certified, we will then ask for you to have the brand owners fill out and sign a name and seal use agreement. We always have you as our participants fill out one during your onboarding, but if you have other brands on your certificate, each brand owner will need to sign one. Lastly, we will ask for your label proofs. So even if your current labels do not have the plant-based logo printed on it, we will still need to review your current labels. Like I mentioned, your auditors will send this over via ShareFile. These items will be required to be submitted before we can complete your audit or go to an inspection if your facility does end up requiring one. Now that we've talked a little bit about your initial requests, we will now talk a little more in depth about your audit requirements. We'll split this requirements into two parts: your input compliance documentations for all inputs, and then your inspection documentation for your production facilities. Let's go a little more in depth about that. So looking at input compliance information, we will need some form of documentation for each ingredient that you use in your products. By ingredients, again, we mean any inputs such as additives, flavorings, microbes, enzymes, carriers, and processing aids. This documentation should come from your ingredient supplier or the ingredient manufacturer. We can accept either a plant-based declaration, which is an SCS form I'll show you in the next slide, or a spec sheet from the manufacturer. If you decide to submit a spec sheet, that spec sheet must give us a few bits of information. It must give us each component of that ingredient, and it must give us the amount of each component. So if you have a chocolate chip, let's just say, for example, the spec sheet should give us a breakdown of, like, let's say the cocoa butter, perhaps vanilla, and maybe it even has salt in it. We need to know the amount of salt that is used in that chocolate chip so we can calculate that amount used in the final product, since you're only allowed to have up to 5% non-plant-based ingredients in your product. So it's important that we get that number in the very beginning in order for us to be able to calculate that. If your supplier spec sheets do not have that important information, then you will need to have your ingredients that suppliers or manufacturers fill out the SCS Plant-Based Declaration. This declaration is where your suppliers will break down the ingredient into its different components, much like we have asked you to provide from the spec sheet. They will need to provide the breakdown of each ingredient so that we can calculate the percentages of plant-based material. If you remember, your product must contain either 95 or 50% plant-based material, depending on its classification. So we will use the breakdown on this form to let us calculate how much plant-based material is in each ingredient, and in turn, your final product. This does need to be signed by your supplier or manufacturer. And again, this needs to be completed for each ingredient from each supplier or manufacturer. So like most of you said, if your facility does not handle animal-derived inputs or in which all animal-derived ingredients are part of the facility's allergen control program, your facility is eligible for a desk audit. For all desk audits, the facility is required to fill out our facility profile. The profile is a comprehensive document designed to facilitate the auditor in gathering essential information during the desk audit process, which would typically be acquired through an inspection, but now instead we're just going to do it through email and documentation submission. And the profile kind of covers the following key sections. The first is going to be general information. After that is going to be management and personnel requirements. After that is going to be management system requirements. After that, identity preservation requirements, and finally, your traceability systems. We won't go in depth to what each question of the facility profile asks, because it is a little bit of a longer document, but your auditor can go over with that with you during your orientation meeting. Once we have done everything and all of your requirements are confirmed, so that will be your input compliance documentation that is all collected, your inputs and facility have been properly risked, your CCPs and SOPs completed and ready for review, we can now schedule your inspection if in fact one is required. With inspections, both virtual and on-site, we assume will be around 4 to 6 hours. For virtual inspections, we will require that you have a strong internet connection that will enable you to take the auditor live on a tour of your facility with whatever device you choose, be that like a laptop, a tablet, or even like a smartphone. For the documentation review portion of your audit, where we will be reviewing your SOPs and CCPs, we will ask that you have a computer that can share your screen to show the various documents that we're going to end up asking for. On-site inspections take place every other year, beginning with the second year of each certification cycle for those facilities that don't have GFSI certification. For those audits, you will schedule a date and a time that works best for you and your auditor. For these, we will need to have a dedicated space for the auditor to conduct the audit with your team, such as like kind of a conference room or something like that, as well as having like a private space for them to complete their review towards the end of the audit. If your facility requires specific clothing requirements to conduct the walkthrough tour, you must let the auditor know beforehand. It must provide like basic items that aren't commonly held, such as like hair nets, gloves, shoe booties, etc. So when we're getting ready for your inspection, you should consult the inspection preparation form. So again, this is really going to be for audits that are going to be more for, are going to have inspections. So we have provided this document as a guide for what SOPs will be requesting during your audit. It is recommended that you use this form during your preparations for those inspections to ensure that you have the SOPs that cover all of the requirements. This list is not necessarily exhaustive, but it does give you a basic idea of what type of documentation will be required for your inspection. We have divided it into 2 separate parts. The first is a list that all the facilities will be required to have ready and finalized by the time the audit is completed. The lower section is SOPs that facilities that are not dedicated are required to have in addition to the ones above. Your auditor can answer any questions you have about these specific requirements listed here, but we can't recommend specific ways to implement these SOPs. We can only advise on the requirements. For your facility, they will need to have a comprehensive list of procedures to be able to comply with the SCS Plant-Based Standard. Every facility, no matter how big or small or located in a home garage or a giant factory, will be required to have all applicable SOPs made and finalized by the time you get to your inspection or the desk audit. During your inspection, we will set aside the longest amount of time to review the SOPs the standard requires. A few types of procedures that may be required are going to be like procedures for internal audits against the SCS Plant-Based Standard, procedures for corrective actions of non-conformities, procedures for handling contaminated goods, even a procedure for a supplier approval program. Well, these are just a few of the SOPs that would be required. I just really want to emphasize that all facilities will be required to show all the various SOPs that are listed within the standard to be certified, whether that's through the desk audit or the inspection itself. So moving forward and looking at the various audit requirements, the standard does require that you identify critical control points in the various production process points where there's a risk of animal product contamination. With these critical control points, you will then also need to find ways to reduce risk of these points. One of the biggest items we see in initial audits that facilities have not done properly is that this is actually not completed. Here is an example of common points in your production process based on your facility classification. Since every facility and production process is different, this list is not going to be applicable to everyone, but as you and your team work to evaluate your process and look for potential areas of contamination, these are some areas of concern we find in facilities. The more high risk your facility, the more potential areas of concern there in fact are. From ingredient receiving to processing equipment, shipping areas, it's up to you and your team to evaluate all parts of your process that may have a risk of contamination. So now what does an inspection look like? So again, this will be for facilities that are not eligible for a desk audit. So they are divided up into 5 different components. We'll start off first with an opening meeting. This is where we'll go over who the audit team is on both sides, confirm the scope of the audit as well as the audit plan, clarify objectives, answer questions, and of course, reiterate confidentiality of the audit. After that is completed, we will jump into a complete review of all your SOPs and documentation. So we'll be examining how your procedures match up with the requirements of the standard. If you follow the inspection preparation form, then your facility will largely be successful in showing compliance documentation. If your facility cannot show specific SOPs or documentation during this portion of the audit, or the SOPs provided do not match the requirements of the standard, you'll be issued a finding for that during this time. The auditor will explain why the documentation provided does not meet the requirements of the standard, but they can't give any specific explanations onto how to implement a better one. After that portion, we will then go ahead and complete our facility walkthrough. During this time, you will take the auditor around your facility, either physically or virtually on camera, and have them observe all your processes, inspect storage areas, review records that are on site, and interview staff if needed. Next, the auditor will take some time to review all notes and prepare your findings. The auditor will generally do this separately in a separate space. After those are completed, you will then get to all come together in a final closing meeting. At this closing meeting, we will summarize all findings that were found during the inspection. After the findings are given, you will get them on a final exit interview where you will sign it and send it back. So then, once you've completed the inspection, your auditor will then pass on the findings to a technical reviewer. The technical reviewer will then review the findings noted by the auditor and determine if the findings are to be considered a non-conformities or can be kept as opportunities for improvement. If the reviewer determines that all findings noted can be classified as opportunities for improvement, then we can issue your certification right away, and you'll be able to work through those observations before the next year's renewal audit. If any finding is then considered to be a non-conformity by the technical reviewer, those must be corrected before your final certificate can be issued. Once you work with the technical reviewer on closing each non-conformity, then they will then approve your audit for final certification. Your assignment coordinator will then generate your plant-based certificate and we'll send it over to you. Then we can say, congratulations, your products are officially SCS Plant-Based certified. And then we'll see you for the following year for your annual audit. And so with that, that is your roadmap on how to be certified to the SCS Plant-Based Standard. Thank you so much for your time today. I think we're going to open it up to any questions that have popped up in the chat with Holly. Quick shout out, there will be a post-webinar survey at the very end of the webinar. It'll pop up automatically on your screen. So if you guys wouldn't mind just quickly holding on right after we finish all of the questions, that would be great to get your guys' feedback. It will take you only like 2 or 3 minutes. And other than that, Holly, did we end up getting any questions?
Yeah, we got a couple great questions here. Okay. The first couple I think I can answer for you, and then I might pass them over to you. Okay. But the first 2 questions here are kind of can lump together, but it's just asking about how we can compare our program for plant-based to any other programs in the market, and if our regulations are, or our program is based on any sort of regulations. So just to answer those questions, there isn't yet any regulation by the FDA or government agency. So for plant-based certifications across the board, it's purely market demand. And I think one of the ways that, or a couple ways that our standard stands out is, and across the board for some of our other programs as well, our program tends to be a bit more complete and strict in some ways. So we're covering a lot more of the bases here. And we cover not only the formulations, but going over any sort of cross-contamination, critical control points that not necessarily other programs are doing. They could theoretically be equivalent to just kind of coming up with your own label and making your own claims. But I'd say the biggest way that the plant-based standard stands out also is our ability to bundle with some of our other programs, like the ones that I mentioned, Tony and I both being involved in, such as gluten-free, non-GMO, or organic. We've streamlined the process, so it's a lot easier for both auditors and clients to avoid, audit fatigue, because a lot of facilities, have to do food safety certifications and all sorts of certifications. So we've made it so you could do an inspection for both plant-based and gluten-free on the same day, and your auditor will cover both programs all at the same time. And then each year for your renewal, they'll do it all at once. So making everything a bit more streamlined and user-friendly is a huge part of all of our programs here. So hopefully that answers some of those. And then we got a couple questions here on just like products as a whole and like what we can certify. So somebody asked, what about vegetable oils like cold pressed canola oil? Would this be eligible for qualification? And does it help that it is by default plant-based?
I see. Okay. Yeah. So unfortunately, if you were to have like a canola oil, we wouldn't be able to certify it. And the reason again is just because we do not certify products that don't have an animal-based alternative on the market. So vegetable oils, there is no animal-derived alternative. So we wouldn't want to certify a product such as that. Just to kind of keep the integrity of the standard, we don't want something that's obviously not plant-based to be certified.
Great. And another question would be here, most of our flavors can be considered eligible for plant-based, but all of our flavors are made on the same machines. Do we need to have dedicated machines, or can we wash them in between flavors?
So that is a really good question. That one would probably require a few additional questions. Generally, washing machines, so like be like a validated process, would be enough. But there are more questions that we would need to answer, that we would need to go more in depth on, that I don't think we'll do here. But essentially, you can parallel process with this, but it lets to say that your flavors then have to have that little caveat of like may contain X animal derived ingredient. Then you would not be able to get those products certified, because your facility cannot guarantee that their validation of cleaning will actually ensure no cross contamination happens. Having a dedicated machine is going to be the best. If there are no animal derived ingredients touching that machine, but it is still possible to get that certified, as long as your facility is confident that your cleaning will in fact make sure that no cross contamination ever happens.
Great.
Yeah, that was a really good question.
And then somebody asked, do we have a mycelium certification? I don't think we do, but I don't know if you know more about that, Tony.
Yeah, I don't think we have a specific mycelium certification, but you may be able to get mycelium certified, like gluten-free, non-GMO, project verified, and maybe plant-based, although we haven't had that come up yet, so I'm not 100% certain. That would be more of a question that we would ask as a team. But because for mycelium, we would have to look at like the substrate of it. Yeah, that would just be a really good question, but we don't have a specific mycelium certification within SCS.
Great. So another question we have here for you, Tony. My company makes sweetened dried fruit that we are looking to get certified. You mentioned that the certification does not allow for non-processed food like dried fruit to be certified, but since we add sugar to the dried fruit, did that qualify for this label?
Oh, that's a really good question. Unfortunately, with just that information, it sounds like we may not be able to certify your products. That's because, again, as far as I know, there would not be a commonly available sweetened dried fruit that would be derived from an animal-based product, so it just doesn't meet that qualification of the standard. But if you were to sell, like, let's say, like a smoothie mix or a fruit or a fruit leather bar or something like that, we could certify it, as it is possible to have animal-derived ingredients added to that. That's a really good question.
Great. And then I think kind of on the same topic of some of the questions from earlier, but one of the questions here is we've already put that our products are plant-based on our packaging, such as a self-claim, like a lot of people mentioned in the poll. So does being certified really help?
Yeah, that's a really, really good one too. So like, as alternative meat and dairy products are getting like much more harder to distinguish from their animal-derived products, and that's just because marketing is definitely, and packaging is becoming very similar between the two categories of ingredients. There are trends that are showing that food manufacturers would benefit from a increased transparency about the contents of their products, because that's what consumers are looking for. I think in that recent Nielsen study from 2020 or 2021 or something around then, that we talked earlier about, just about, I want to say it's half of consumers located in the US and Canada do distrust self-made claims on food labeling when shopping in stores. In my personal opinion, I think it's because there was a rise of people using the word natural in the past, with no real distinction of what natural is. Is a Cheeto natural? Definitely a question for someone else other than me to answer. But anyways, I think consumers really are starting to distrust that. They're not just taking it for face value. So these studies do show that products with like the free from label, such as like the plant-based standard, gluten-free certifications, non-GMO standards, people tend to see as better, maybe even healthier, and dare I say even superior than those without like that certified validated label. So again, this can, of course, kind of shape how your consumers purchase the products. So you can make your own self-made statement for sure, but I do believe having that additional certification does guarantee to your clients and to your customers that you are in fact plant-based. Okay, yeah. Any other questions, Holly?
I think I just have one more.
Okay.
Says our factory has already been through the HACCP process, and we are even certified under SQF. Do we really need to do our CCPs again for this?
That's definitely a really good question. So this does depend on your facility's classification. I'm just going to assume, just for the sake of argument, your facility is the highest classification, a non-dedicated facility with your animal derived ingredients not a part of an allergen control program. So in cases like this, your original SQF food safety certification may not cover the specific scope of these products that you are producing. So ultimately, when you are reviewing it, you would want to at least re-review your CCPs and ensure that they cover instances of now animal input contamination. It is likely that your HACCP plan already does cover this, but I'd say you need to evaluate with your leadership team to ensure like this kind of risk factor is actually included in your HACCP plan. If your facility is dedicated though, I would strongly assume your HACCP plan, especially if it's certified with a certification such as SQF, would already include all of the CCPs you may have. But again, you would probably want to double check that with your team. But yes, you may need to do your redo your HACCP plan with new CCPs for this, but it really just depends on if that was accounted for in your original certification.
Great.
Cool. Anything else? Cool. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining Holly and I. We really do appreciate it. You can see here our Director of Sales, Ned's contact information is here. So please reach out to him or reach out to us if you have any questions or concerns. And like I said, there will be a very short survey at the end here. So please do fill it out. And we hope you guys have a fantastic Tuesday. And we'll be chatting with you all hopefully soon. Have a great one, and thank you for attending, everyone.